I think that thing heard me. It sensed me. Because despite the distance, it turned to look at me and ran back in my direction. I swear I saw exactly the same thing you described. The sweet smile, but with black teeth. That thing was looking directly at the window where I was, with the same expression you wrote about in your story. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here once again in this space where, as always, we have some of the most impactful stories that have been sent to us. This is one of those intense episodes that, perhaps unlike the previous one, for example, contains stories that are very hard to believe. Experiences that probably seem impossible to some, but remember that we are only as skeptical as our own experiences allow us to be. So I wish that if you've never experienced a paranormal event, you can always continue that way so you can keep this very healthy skepticism. May stories like the ones we're about to hear always seem distant to you, almost impossible. But if not, if at some point you have your own experience you already know, we'll listen to it here. We'll be waiting for you with open arms if at any moment you become the protagonists of night stories. We start in 5, 4, 3, 2. My name is Jorge. Hello. I never would have believed that one of your stories would affect me this way. I have several stories about paranormal encounters, but honestly, I've always controlled my emotions when it comes to that. However, that story about the woman who claimed to be an angel at the gas station, the lady who seemed to be wearing a human skin suit, and ran in a strange way. I think I saw her at a very young age when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I think maybe that's why I didn't remember her consciously. I remember one of those nights when I liked to sleep by the window in my house. Yes, by the window. It was a grill that stuck out from the house where I would put some blankets and a pillow, and I liked to sleep there some nights. One of those early mornings I saw something running in the same strange way you described, with the same filth, with loose skin, as if it didn't belong to it. Already asleep, something almost instinctive woke me up, and I managed to see that thing running, passing in front of my house. I half sat up to see what it was, and that was my mistake. I think that thing heard me, sensed me, because despite the distance, it turned to look at me and ran back in my direction. I jumped from the window to the ground, but childish curiosity made me look for a small hand mirror and position it so I could see out to the street. I swear to you, I swear to all of you that I saw exactly what you described, the sweet smile, but with black teeth. That thing was looking directly at the window where I was, with the same expression you wrote about in your story. I don't live in that place anymore. I moved away many years ago. That place, honestly, is a very rural town, but it's peaceful. The strange thing is that I was just walking toward where I live now, listening to your story, when I almost lost my balance. The moment that lost memory came back to my mind. My legs were shaking, and I had to sit down for a moment to regain my courage. Just remembering that look broke me, and you put it very clearly in my head again. The strangest thing of all is that I'm not from Mexico. I'm from Venezuela, but I swear to you that's exactly what I saw. Hello, community. What I'm about to tell you is something that's confusing even for me. I still can't fully understand it, and even though time has passed, I still find it hard to process. I ask you, please, to keep this story anonymous. The names, places, and details are not accurate, and for my safety, I prefer to keep it that way. Once you know the story, you'll understand why. To begin with, I have to tell you about my sister Sophia, my twin. We were so identical that we often had fun confusing our friends, our teachers, and even our own mother. Once, we were always very close until we entered high school. Sophia, with her outgoing personality, was never alone, always surrounded by friends, admirers, and attention. I, on the other hand, was the opposite. Shy, reserved, and with just a couple of friends. While she stood out and shined as one of the most beloved and popular students, I was pretty much invisible, the target of mockery and constant bullying. Over time, the relationship between us began to crack. Maybe the deepest rift opened the day I caught Sophia reading my diary, my secret diary, the one where I confessed my insecurities and, above all, my crush on a boy from school, a popular one. Shortly after, she started a relationship with him. The betrayal, not the relationship, hurt me. That she did it knowing how I felt, almost as if she wanted to hurt me deliberately. I'm telling you this so you understand that our bond was already broken, and that Sophia was starting to become someone different. In my final year of high school, I noticed the most unsettling changes. Sophia started hanging out with older people, not adults, but guys who seemed to already be in college, outside of our school environment. It wasn't unusual to see her go out with them, making up excuses for mom, group projects, trips to the movies, excuses that my mother didn't question, since as a single mother, she had to work all day, and that made it hard for her to know what was happening with us. And I never told her either. I already had enough problems with my twin, and ratting her out would just be another one. Besides, I assumed she was just going out partying with them, that in her rebelliousness she had older friends. At school, she was still the cheerful and popular girl, but at home she became more and more distant and withdrawn. One afternoon, when I came back from a friend's house, I heard my mother arguing heatedly with Sophia. I went upstairs and what I saw scared me. On the floor there was a board, a Ouija board, black candles, scattered salt, a book that looked like it was about the occult, and other objects I didn't recognize. They were things that Mom had found hidden in her closet. She confronted her very angrily, demanding an explanation. Sophia, with a look of hatred that I'll never forget, responded in a firm voice. That she was the element. Yes, that's what she said, looking at her with contempt. You'll never understand. I am the element. And after she said that, she pointed at me, and with a strange voice deeper than usual, she added, I am the element, but she is the one who binds me here. If she didn't exist, everything would be different. My mom, confused, reacted the only way she could. She slapped her and yelled that she was grounded. For a long time, I wondered why my mother didn't say anything else. Why didn't she ask Sophia what she meant and just limited herself to forbidding her from going out with friends? She took away all her privileges and ordered her that from that day on, she wanted to see her at home immediately after school. Far from improving the situation, that only seemed to make it worse. Sophia's attitude became even more troubling, more reserved, more distant. She looked at me with disdain, spoke to me with mockery, or with a sarcasm that hurt, as if I had done something to provoke her. At school, meanwhile, Sophia kept meeting with those older, unfamiliar people. Sometimes she would sneak out in the middle of classes to go with them and would come back right at dismissal time, as if she knew she had to be very careful in case Mom seemed to be looking for her. That's how the rest of high school went by. Sophia drifted further and further away, not just from me, but also from our mother. The few times she spoke to me, she did it sarcastically and was usually very rude, Most of the time, she just ignored me. When it was time to choose a university, she announced to the family that she would go study in another state with a full scholarship. She said she had applied on her own, that she didn't want to share it with us, and that she had been accepted. She gave my mom an official letter signed and stamped by the institution, and with that, a month later, she left home. First, Dobson signed up. Would I be lying if I said her departure didn't hurt me? Because even though she sometimes seemed to hate me, I still saw her as what she had always been. My reflection, my other half, a part of my soul. I couldn't understand how it could be so easy for her to erase me from her life, to treat me like I was the plague. I stayed in our city and attended a public university to study veterinary medicine. I had always been fascinated by animals, and when I saw that I had been accepted, I felt immensely happy. It was a childhood dream, one I once shared with Sophia, but now that it had come true, it weighed on me like a sad memory. After Sophia left, contact with her practically disappeared. Sometimes she would call my mom and talk to her, and I would hear about her through what my mom told me, but nothing more. Something else that happened was that after she left, I started having dreams. In them, I saw Sophia standing in the middle of a clearing wearing a transparent dress. She would kneel down with her fists clenched against a floor full of symbols and mutter words I couldn't understand, words I could barely make out. I could hear. The dream. It was strange, because when I saw that image, I knew it wasn't me, that it was Sophia, and that I was more like a spectator. I would always wake up when, suddenly, she would get up and run toward me with her eyes completely white. It was a terrible image that always made me very scared, that made me wake up screaming. Over time, my dreams about Sophia became very frequent. It was always the same. She, in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by symbols drawn on the ground with something dark, kneeling, murmuring words in a language I didn't understand. Over time, I understood, and don't ask me how. It wasn't that I was dreaming about her, but that I was seeing what she was doing somewhere else. It was as if an invisible window let me spy, or even worse, as if she was forcing me to witness it. It was something like a splitting that she imposed on me, that she forced me into. So, a few more months went by while I wasn't sleeping well because of the nightmares, college, and some other things, like the recent breakup with a boyfriend. Emotionally and physically, I felt very tired, exhausted. Since Sophia left, I had lost a lot of weight. I was constantly depressed, anxious, and the recent events weren't helping at all. And here, Comunidad is where, for me, the real nightmare began. I remember the day of the accident very well. I had left the university late, it was raining, and the avenue was empty. I remember listening to a very popular song at that time when suddenly there was interference in the music. A voice that at first was eerie but then became clear, very clear. A distorted, seemingly male voice said my name during the song. Sophia. For some reason, I started to feel short of breath, and suddenly, next to the avenue, I saw Sophia standing on the sidewalk, watching me directly as I passed by. It was just a second. For a moment, I couldn't see her clearly because I drove by quickly, but it was her. I would recognize her anywhere. I kept going, nervous, thinking maybe it had just been a trick of my mind, when suddenly, a little further ahead, there she was, standing on the sidewalk again, just watching me once more. I passed her again, but this time I decided to slam on the brakes and put the car in reverse. That was my mistake in my anxiety to go back and make sure it was really her and not just a vision. I didn't notice that when I stopped, I ended up right in the middle of an intersection. The last thing I remember is the sound of a truck's horn as it crashed into me, and in that instant, everything went black. Silence, my ears ringing. I remember the sound of a truck's horn, and in that instant, silence, my ears ringing. I remember that I was trapped in a place where time didn't exist, where there were shadows surrounding me, and where that same male voice kept repeating my name. During the time I was in a coma, I kept having visions where I saw my twin presiding over rituals, raising knives surrounded by black candles and chanting. I was always in the center, motionless, as if my own body had been offered up. I always felt myself fading away, as if life was slowly slipping out of me. Sometimes the scene would change and I would see my twin in some kind of church wearing a black dress and kneeling, praying to figures that weren't saints, to figures that had large deformed horns. Meanwhile, I felt like something was pulling me from the inside, as if they wanted to tear my soul out piece by piece. And there, among those shadows, among all the visions I was having, I could hear her. You are the price. You are my offering. You are the price. You are my offering. I later learned the doctors had already given up on me. My mom, desperate, looked for specialists, tests, alternative treatments, but nothing offered her an answer. Although she was never a strictly religious woman, at that time she clung to the hospital chapel. She would spend hours there praying, crying, asking God why she had to go through that. She confessed to me that she prayed not only for me, but also for Sophia, who never came to see me or to accompany her, despite her pleas. That abandonment also tore them apart, one daughter absent and the other one dying. It was on one of those visits that something strange occurred. The chapel fell into absolute silence, a silence that was not uncomfortable but reassuring. My mother was crying in the last row when she heard footsteps. They weren't firm, not difficult, just slow. She felt like someone who had always been in that chapel was present. A woman she didn't know sat next to her, someone with a very ordinary appearance, but with a special intense look in her eyes. In a very low voice, she said to her, "Your daughter is not sick." Someone very close to her gave her up. There is a bond that keeps her here, but not for long. No. She should have been scared, but she wasn't. Something inside her, a certainty she couldn't explain. He shouted at her that she had to trust, that this encounter wasn't a coincidence, that if she wanted to see me wake up, she had to pay attention, obey. The woman gave her a small amulet, a little pouch made of dark fabric filled with dried herbs, a red thread, and something that looked like bone dust. She told her to place it under my pillow and wait. That night, the stranger arrived at the hospital without anyone stopping her. She entered as if she were part of my family, locked my room door, and unfolded. What would have seemed like heresy to anyone else, but my mother witnessed it with great expectation and faith. She lit 3 candles in the corners, drew a circle of salt, found an ashes around my bed, and placed a bowl of water on the floor, into which she soon dropped a few drops of blood, from her own blood. She began to murmur words that my mom doesn't remember, since she was praying silently, holding a rosary, even though she was trembling, even though it all seemed strange to her. Something in the atmosphere, something in that room, told her that this ritual wasn't darkness, but the only way to save me, a me. Inside my dream, I felt it. Something changed in my nightmares, as if an invisible and violent wind swept away the evil that was suffocating me. The male voice that said my name began to break, sounding farther and farther away, and a buzzing sound went through my ears, accompanied by a burning sensation in my chest, as if my heart suddenly remembered it had to beat. I saw Sophia kneeling in front of me, her eyes wide open, her mouth twisted in a scream of rage. She stretched out her hands like claws, desperate to hold on to me, but the dark substance that was imprisoning me slowly dissolved, like smoke. The last time I saw my twin was there, with rage on her face, a rage that wasn't human. I felt a violent pull in my stomach, as if an invisible cord snapped inside me. My body felt heavy, but at the same time a warm force that didn't come from me was pushing me upward, forcing me to let go of what was holding me back. I remember Sophia scream my name one last time, a scream that was soon drowned out. And right at that moment, air rushed into my lungs like a blow. I felt pain, cold, the weight of my real body. I don't know how much time passed, but I know that a while after that ritual, I opened my eyes. The doctors called it a miracle, but later my mom told me everything. Someone had wanted to offer me as a payment to a deity, and even though I sensed it, I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to believe that Sophia could be capable of something like that. My sister, my other half. Days went by without us knowing anything about her. Her calls had stopped weeks ago. Her messages had already disappeared. My mother, fearing the worst, decided to go look for her. She told me that when she opened the door to her apartment, a horrible stench hit her immediately. She entered the apartment and walked toward the bedroom, only to find her worst nightmare. Sophia was lying lifeless on the floor, her face pale and with an expression that my mom describes as painful. The position of her body, with her arms extended and her hands open facing the ceiling, facing upward. And the surroundings were also very frightening. The walls were covered with strange symbols, painted in red on the table and on the floor. Candles, lots of black and red candles, burned down almost to nothing. Wooden carved figures with empty eyes, others with distorted shapes, open books with illegible writings, amulets hanging from the furniture, lots of chains and small fragments of bones. The whole atmosphere was heavy, very oppressive. According to the authorities, it was a suicide. They found no signs of external violence or evidence of another person. There, among her belongings, they found something that left us stunned and added even more pain to the situation. Sophia never went to college like she told us. Among her papers, her notes, and strange journals, they found all her belongings, a cult, the rituals, the promises she had made, and the most heartbreaking thing. The day arrived. Every line confirmed what my nightmares had hinted at for months. The Middle East. Everything had been part of a plan, part of something that was already written. That day, I realized with absolute terror that I hadn't just lost my sister. We had also discovered who she was, what she was capable of. Sophia wasn't just my reflection. My twin was someone who had given her own blood, her own family, to forces that couldn't be understood or confronted. And even though I thank God I'm alive, her shadow, what's left of that dark pact, still lingers near me. I can still feel it. The day of her burial was very cold, even though it was the middle of summer. The day of her burial, there was a lot of cold, even though it was the middle of summer. The truth is, community, that despite the pain we were going through as a family, I still had many doubts. I still wanted to know. And those doubts were resolved a few days later. One day, while we were talking in the kitchen, someone knocked on the door, and it was the same lady who had guided my mom during my coma. My mother was happy to see her. She wanted me to meet her. She invited her in, and inevitably the topic of Sophia came up in the conversation. The lady, the witch, good witch, or I don't know what to call her. She looked at me intently with her dark, piercing eyes, and with a firm voice she said to me, "Your sister Sophia was the one who was supposed to offer you as a sacrifice. It was planned. The rituals, the symbols, the accident, everything was meant to seal the pact, but something prevented the payment from being made. The deity she made the pact with doesn't tolerate delays or excuses. That's why she paid in your place. Sophia is no longer alive because the entity claimed her. You survived because your bond with life and your strength blocked the sacrifice and nothing else. It was the ritual I performed that simply helped you come back, but that strength was always within you." Since then, community, sometimes I feel Sophia here with me, very close. It's as if by understanding what she did, she became more present. She's not always here, and it's less and less each time. But when it happens, I feel a very strange chill. It scares me a lot. Sometimes, when I walk past a mirror, I see a flicker in my eyes that I didn't make. I feel like sometimes it's her watching me through them. On quiet nights when I lie down and close my eyes, I go back to that clearing. I see her in each one, murmuring words or prayers I don't understand, with her fists against the ground. And for a moment I feel there's no distance between us, that we are one and the same. Sometimes a smell of burnt herbs fills my room, or I hear a barely audible whisper saying my name. Like all twins, my sister and I were, are, and will always be connected forever. I know I'll see her again, and that terrifies me. Thank you for making it this far. Since you're still listening, it's time to remind you that you should be subscribed to this space. If you've made it to this part of the episode, you should, without a doubt, become part of this community. Subscribing is completely free, it helps us a lot, and you'll never miss an episode of Relatos de la Noche again. In the description, we'll also leave you all the necessary links in case you want to visit our page. Imagine sending us your story, following our social media, or buying one of the books that are still available. Thank you for almost selling them out everywhere. We never thought we'd reach over 50,000 books sold, honestly. If you find one, buy it. And if there aren't any left, try to find someone you can borrow it from. And please leave us your feedback. We continue with one more story tonight. Good evening, Uriel and community. I hope you're all doing well. I don't know if you'll believe what I'm about to say, or if you'll think I'm crazy or that I'm making it up, but either way, I'm going to tell you. Especially so that other young people don't make the same mistake I did, I'm telling you this. I live in Jalisco. My name is Andres, and when I was 15 years old, I was a very skeptical young man. I didn't believe in anything paranormal, not in ghosts, not in apparitions, and even less that the Ouija board was a way to communicate with the afterlife. But then Marcos and Juan, both my age, were strong believers in all that, and were always telling stories. They said we had to investigate places, and that one day we would find a haunted one, or have a contact. And that way, we would become the most famous paranormal investigators in Mexico. I, as always with everything, just went along with them so they wouldn't feel bad, but deep down I felt like I was wasting my time. Anyway, One night, Juan came to the place where we used to meet and showed us something he had gotten. It was a Ouija board. I admit that when I saw it, I felt a very strange chill, but I tried not to give it more importance than it deserved. As I mentioned, I didn't believe in that. Juan insisted that we should play it, but in a place where there were really spirits. At that moment, he didn't want to tell us the place. He just said we should get some candles. In Jalisco, specifically in Guadalajara, there is a market where they sell everything related to occultism, worship of Santa Muerte, card readings, and so on. A better place to get some candles. No, of course, we could buy them at any store, but we wanted it to be something closer to the paranormal, according to our thinking. The next day, very early, Marcos and I went to that market to buy them. That's where the first strange thing in this story happened. As we entered, there was an elderly lady begging at the entrance. When we walked past her and gave her a coin, she said to me, "Don't play with those things. Don't play with what you don't know. You might regret it." The chill I felt when I saw the board came back, but my only thought was, crazy old lady. I turned around to catch up with Marcos. We bought the candles, and when we left the market, I didn't see the lady anymore. Evening came. We waited for Juan, who arrived on time and told us we were going to Mezquitan Cemetery. I immediately replied, "Are you crazy? To Mezquitan Cemetery? Seriously, are you crazy?" And he quickly, with a mocking voice, answered me, "What, are you scared or what? I thought you didn't believe in any of this? Does it matter where we go?" Well, let's go then, I thought. What could be different about playing it in a cemetery if the paranormal doesn't really exist? Did we get to that cemetery? A place that commands respect during the day, but at night, it's a whole different world. The tall walls covered in vines, the sculptures of angels and virgins with faces worn by time, everything contributed to creating an atmosphere of mystery and melancholy. It's worth noting that the cemetery was still open. We went in and wandered among the graves, reading the names and dates engraved on the tombstones. And it was like traveling through time, imagining the lives of those people who rested beneath the ground. Suddenly, we noticed that the sun was beginning to set, and the cemetery workers were getting ready to close. We hid behind some large mausoleums so the security guard wouldn't see us and kick us out. We waited for more than half an hour, just listening to the echo of our own hearts and the nighttime sounds of the city drifting in from afar. And only when night fell, you could see the faint light from the path. Of course I felt a little scared, I have to admit it, but I wasn't going to give Juan and Marco a reason to make fun of me. Right? Again, people always make fun of skeptics at the slightest sign of fear. They've noticed it as if they didn't have the right to feel it. We went to a very old grave, one of those that seem abandoned by their relatives, and the tombstone was covered with moss and lichens. The rusted iron cross was leaning to one side, about to fall. There, Juan lit the candles, creating a circle of flickering light around. The scent of burning wax mixed with the smell of damp earth, of wilted flowers, with the scent of the cemetery. We placed the board on the grave, being careful not to disturb the dried flowers that adorned it. He asked the three of us to hold the pointer, feeling the cold metal against our fingers, and he instructed us to simply greet. I don't remember the ritual very well, and that's a good thing, but I do remember that I asked a question. Is there anyone here we can talk to who wants to tell us something? The first time, nothing happened. I laughed and even told him, "See, we just came all the way here to waste our time. I told you this doesn't exist." But I asked again, "Does anyone here want to say something? Is there someone here who wants to communicate with us?" Remember when I said I didn't want you to think I was crazy? Do you remember when I said at the start of this story that something unbelievable was happening? I said it because of the following, because after I asked that question, there was an answer, but it didn't come from the board. Here I am. We heard a voice that, I swear to you, came from inside the tomb. At that moment, the three of us jumped up, knocking over the candles and the board without caring, and we ran terrified toward the main road. We ran toward the first wall, behind the main gate, stumbling over tombstones and dodging crosses. At the wall, we searched for a place with closely spaced graves to make climbing easier. We found it, and the three of us jumped over, adrenaline rushing, as if something was pulling us down, as if an invisible force wouldn't let us leave. It was a very heavy feeling, a sense that something terrible was about to happen. We jumped out onto the street without looking back. I jumped first, feeling the cold asphalt under my hands. When I landed, Marcos was right behind me, breathing heavily and his eyes full of terror. And finally, Juan jumped. I ran, and Marcos was right behind me. Suddenly, he shouted at me to wait, that Juan wasn't coming with us. We built up our courage and returned to the cemetery. As we got closer, we saw Juan lying on the sidewalk, unconscious. He was pale and had his eyes closed, as if he were asleep. I remember very clearly how my hands were shaking. When we called our parents, they told us to call an ambulance, that they were on their way. The ambulance arrived quickly, the sirens wailing. That night, the civil hospital was very close to that cemetery. With our hearts in our throats, we saw them put Juan on a stretcher. They asked us what had happened. We simply said that we were playing inside the cemetery. We didn't want to tell them what we had heard, much less what we were doing. We thought we were already going to get in trouble, but if they really knew what we were doing there, it would have been even worse. Juan fell on his head, and that blow caused him temporary memory loss. He didn't remember anything that happened, and he didn't remember us either. His parents blamed us, so they didn't let us see him at all. Days went by, and even though everything seemed to slowly go back to normal, we couldn't forget what happened. One night, I started hearing someone crying in my living room. It was strange because I was alone. I thought maybe someone had come in, that something bad had happened. I quickly left my room, and when I entered the living room, I saw very clearly a little girl standing in the middle. A little girl who looked very real. She didn't look ghostly, even though her hair covered her face, even though she was wearing a nightgown. Even so, my first impression was that she was real, until I paid attention, until I saw that there was something very strange. I swear to you, her clothes, just her clothes, seemed to float as if she were underwater. I was frozen with panic because just seeing her caused terror. When I regained my mobility and heard that the crying was turning into laughter, I ran terrified to my room. When I was starting to calm down, to relax a little, my cell phone rang. It was Marcos. He was very nervous. He told me he had heard something in the house. He said he saw something in the dark, very clearly. He described to me a little girl hiding in his room, first crying and then mocking him. He described her exactly like the same girl I had just seen in my house. Since then, we haven't stopped seeing, hearing, or feeling things. First, it happened to Marcos and me, then also to my mom, who saw the girl, and later she also appeared to my sister. It got to a point where so much was happening, things falling by themselves, lights turning on and off, bulbs exploding out of nowhere, laughter, crying, that we had to tell what we had done that night, we had to confess it. The same thing was happening at Marcos's house. His mom said that something had come back with us from the cemetery. Something that wasn't from this world, something that wasn't from this world, and even less so. Well, I don't know how she did it, but eventually my mom contacted a medium who told us that we hadn't closed the portal we opened. On the Ouija board, you have to say goodbye, otherwise you leave a portal open for anything to come through. To this plane, entities that will be permanently attached to you. And she said that an evil spirit had followed us, that it had attached itself to us and our families. She gave us amulets, and then we also asked a priest if he could come and bless the houses. It's been 13 years since that happened. After the medium's visit and the priest's blessing, the activity decreased until it almost disappeared. But we don't know if it was thanks to them, the amulets, or simply that we got used to living, to ignoring the details that scare us. We only heard that Juan was better and that his family soon moved out of the neighborhood. We believe the same thing was happening at his house, but he never spoke to us again after he recovered. To this day, the only thing for sure is that our lives were never the same after that night, after what started as a prank, with the desire to face something truly paranormal. We don't know when or how we'll be able to get rid of what attached itself to us in the cemetery, of what we went looking for. If my experience serves as an example so that others don't make the same mistake we did by messing with what we don't understand, will I have fulfilled my duty by telling it? I hear them every night. For a long time, I've heard so many stories that I would have once attributed to imagination. I like paranormal stories, but this is different. Once you've experienced something, they feel much closer, like being inside a horror movie. Good evening, community, and again, thank you very much for listening to me.